Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be looking at some anticipated releases for the last part of the year, and there's some stuff coming out between October and December that I am very excited about. I did notice as I was pulling together my notes for this video that I apparently am like really into gothic horror at the moment because there are a lot of gothic horror books on this list, but there's also some other things on the list as well, so hopefully there's something in here for you to be excited about, and I think we should just dive in because I have several books to talk about, and quite a few of them are coming out right at the start of October. So we have like 5 or 6 books that are coming out on October 1st, and the first of them is Swordcrossed by Freya Marske, which is about a like heir to a struggling family business. I believe it's historical fantasy, but this heir to a struggling family business who hires a con man to teach him how to sword fight, how to duel, and I just don't need to know anything more than that. That sounds super fun, and I've really enjoyed everything else I've read from Freya Marske. I've read the first book in the Last Binding trilogy, and I'm currently reading the second book in that trilogy, and just I love the way that she writes characters. I like the way that her plots and her world building really feel well thought through in the ways that they matter to the romances. I just appreciate that like level of detail and the way everything is kind of interconnected, so I'm very excited for this. The next book coming out on October 1st is The City in Glass by Nevo. This one is about a demon who rules a city called Azrael until the city falls with the invasion of angels. She ends up cursing one of the angels to be bound to the city, and they're kind of trapped in this cycle of hatred against each other for a long period of time, but ultimately are working towards building the future of the city. However, disaster strikes a second time, and they have to decide whether they're willing to let the city fall again. Super interested in this. I think it's a very vague synopsis, so I don't really know what to expect from it, but I've really enjoyed some other books from Nevo, especially the Singing Hills cycle, so I'm intrigued by this and I want to see how I feel about it. And I'm also curious to see what like other reviews say when it comes out, because it just sounds like it's going to be a little bit weird and a little bit like mind-bending or twisty maybe. Not really sure what to expect. The third book coming out on October 1st is A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Liang, which is inspired by the legend of Zishi, which is a legend from China, an ancient Chinese myth. There's a great tagline on Goodreads that I think describes this better than I can, but it says, inspired by the legend of Zishi, one of the famous 4 beauties of ancient China, A Song to Drown Rivers is an epic historical fantasy about womanhood, war, sacrifice, and love against all odds. Her beauty hides a deadly purpose. I'm very intrigued by that. I believe the main character is supposed to be some sort of like spy or assassin, and she's supposed to be seducing someone for information, and there's going to be like lots of intrigue and court politics, and also I think she's struggling with her attraction for her handler, so very curious to see how that's going to play out, and it just sounds like it's going to be really interesting, really like tense and full of political machinations, and I think it's going to be really fun. The next one, also on October 1st, penultimate book coming out on October 1st, is The Bogwife by Kay Chronister. This sounds really interesting. This one is an Appalachian Gothic, and it's about a family that ritually sacrifices their patriarch once a generation, and the cranberry bog that they maintain gives them a bog wife that continues on the family line. But this year it hasn't worked, and they're having to like deal with the fallout of that, and it's like a bunch of very different siblings who are trying to decide like how to move forward with this like change in their kind of like family cycles and their family like status quo. So I'm really intrigued by this. It sounds super weird and dark, so yeah, curious. I just found this one today and I could not resist putting it on the list. After that, we're getting a new book from River Solomon, which I didn't know they had a new book coming out, so I'm very excited to have seen this. This is another one I found today. This one's called Model Home, and it's about a family that's like the first Black family to move into a white suburb outside of Dallas, and as soon as they move in, weird kind of supernatural seeming stuff starts happening in the house. And now the book is following the siblings from this family many years later after the deaths of their parents, and they're returning to that house to kind of deal with that situation and figure out like what actually was happening in the house, which sounds really interesting to me. This is another one with a great Goodreads tagline, so let me pull that up and read it to you because I like it a lot. So this one says, River Solomon turns the haunted house story on its head, unearthing the dark legacies of segregation and racism in the suburban American South. Unbridled, raw, and daring, Model Home is the story of secret histories uncovered and of a queer family battling for their right to live, grieve, and heal amid the terrors of contemporary American life. Next up, we're getting The Black Hunger by Nicholas Pullen, which is the first one that's not coming out on October 1st. This one's coming out on October 8th, and this is one where I just genuinely don't really know what the book is about. The synopsis on Goodreads is super vague, and it just says John Sackville will soon be dead. Shadows writhe in the corners of his cell as he mourns the death of his secret lover, and the gnawing hunger inside him grows impossible to ignore. I'm wondering if this is gonna be like a vampire story or a cannibal story or something like that, but I do see it's described as a sprawling gothic journey, so again, there's that like gothic horror theme popping up again, and yeah, I don't know what to expect here, but I'm intrigued because the synopsis is so vague. After that, we're getting All the Hearts You Eat by Hailey Piper on the 15th of October. This is yet another gothic story. This one is described as gothic horror about small-town mysteries, local folklore, and the things we leave behind when we're gone. This one is about a young girl or young woman who discovers another girl's body having died. Unclear if it was a murder or like some other kind of death, maybe an unnatural death. Something has happened. She discovers a body and finds herself being haunted by the ghost of the girl who has died. And then it says, because Cape Morning isn't a ghost town, but a town filled with ghosts. And Ivory is about to discover just what happens when you let one in. So it seems like maybe the ghost isn't friendly. I'm really interested to see what this is going to be like as well. I see it tagged as vampires on Goodreads, so I don't know if that's accurate or not. But this is, you know, another one where the synopsis doesn't tell me a whole lot, but I am curious about it just because it sounds like really interesting, and like the elements that are there are very curious. So I'm looking forward to seeing like what some other reviewers have to say when they start reading it, and yeah, just want to know what this one is going to be about because I don't really have a sense of where that like synopsis is going to go. Also on October 15th, we're getting Uncanny by Junji Ito, which is a memoir of sorts where I think he's like doing like a retrospective on some of his work and thinking about like how he writes what he writes and why he writes what he writes, but also like why we like stories like that. So I'm just very intrigued by this. I got rejected for the ARC for this. I am devastated. However, I did pre-order it, so it's fine. I'm gonna read it like as soon as I can get my hands on it. It just sounds super interesting, and I think Junji Ito's work is just so interesting. I don't always love his manga, but like the ideas are always really weird, and like I don't understand how somebody could come up with them, but they're really creative and his art is incredible. So like I definitely want to know more about this and like his perspective on his own work. I think that's going to be super cool. One more coming out on the 15th of October. I'm realizing that basically all of these books are October, and now that I'm looking at my list more closely, there's only one book in November and none for December. So there is that. But the next one is Framed by John Grisham and Jim McCoskey, coming out on the 15th, and this one is a nonfiction work where they're looking at the failures of the American justice system through the stories of 10 different people who were wrongfully accused and convicted of crimes that they did not commit. Very curious to see what that's like. I like John Grisham's writing. I grew up reading a lot of John Grisham, so I haven't read any of his other nonfiction. I know he wrote The Innocent Man like several years ago, but I haven't read that one. But I like nonfiction about crime and justice, so I definitely want to pick this one up, if only for nostalgia's sake, because I've read so much John Grisham in my life, but also just because I think this is an interesting lens to look at the justice system. On October 22nd, we're getting The Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne, which is, I believe, the end of a trilogy. It's the Bloodsworn Saga, I think is what it's called. I have not read book one of this, which is the Shadow of the Gods. That's what it is. So book one is just Shadow of the Gods, and then I think book two is The Hunger of the Gods. I don't know anything about the plot of this one. I just know the book three is coming out, and I wanted to put it on this list just in case you weren't aware, if you were enjoying the series and weren't aware about the third book coming out, or if you just needed a little extra push to read the first book. I know I do. I'm very interested in reading this series. I just have not been in like a big epic fantasy series mood lately, but I know that I've heard some really fantastic things about it, so I think that's going to be interesting to read, and also curious to see how like the conclusion turns out, like if people end up liking the way that the trilogy concludes. Also on the 22nd, we're getting It Will Only Hurt for a Moment by Delilah S. Dawson, which I can't remember if this is a novel or novella, but it's about a young woman who like goes to this isolated artist commune, and I believe she's like a potter. She makes clay pottery, but she arrives at the commune, and while she is trying to dig a hole for a pit kiln, she discovers the body of a young woman, and the other artists in the wake of this discovery start to act like very strangely and do like really repetitive things, and she starts to wonder if she is going mad. out in the wilderness. So yeah, sounds like fun to me, and I'm curious about like the kind of artist commune setting and how that's going to play into the whole thing. The last book for October is Blood Over Brighthaven by ML Wong, which was previously published as either a self or indie published book, and I've heard fantastic things about this one. I've also heard great things about her other book, The Sword of Kaigen. But this one is a dark academia fantasy story about a woman who's like the first woman high mage in this government office. I think it's called the High Magistry, in a city called Tyran that is surrounded by a magical barrier, and she gets assigned an assistant who is a janitor. But what nobody knows is that this janitor previously was a nomadic hunter living outside of the magical barrier, and he's been in the city for about 10 years, but he ends up working with her to try and uncover some sort of ancient secret. Very curious about that. It says something about like magic is a cost and the collectors have come calling. That sounds really ominous, and again, I've just heard really good things about this, and I think it's going to be a really fun fall read. I'm also hoping to read some dark academia this fall, so it's perfect for that. The very last book on my list is The Legacy of Arniston House by T.L. Huchu, which is coming out November 12th. Had to look at my list again. This one is book 4 in the Edinburgh Nights series, which I am loving. I love Europa as a protagonist. This one I'm so excited for because the end of book 3 leaves off in a really interesting place. We have a very big change in the status quo for Ropa, and some of her like relationships alter pretty dramatically at the end of book 3, and I am so excited to see where the series is going to go from here, because like I'm kind of devastated by the things that have happened for her at the end of book 3, but I'm so interested to see like how that turning point is going to translate into new adventures for her. So yeah, I'm very excited for this one. I love the series, and I'm excited that we're getting another installment because I just read book 3 earlier this year, so it's like I don't have to wait too long to read the next piece. So those are all the books I currently have on my list of anticipated releases for this last little chunk of the year. Definitely let me know down in the comments below if there's a book coming out that I have missed that's not on my list that you're excited for. I'm always looking to add to my list and have more things to look forward to, so I definitely want to know if you know of some that I've missed. So that's pretty much all I have for you today. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, I hope you'll consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting at least once a week, usually on Saturdays, sometimes on Tuesdays and Saturdays, but mostly on Saturdays, and I really hope to see you in the next video. Bye.